In a majority of the previous God of War games, Kratos is given a small arsenal of weapons to use at his disposal. I didn't play any of the older games as I was a child and had parents that didn't want me to have any fun. I'm just kidding, Mom. I love ya. So I don't know fully if that's the case outside of special interactions that you can do to smaller enemies. However, that brings me to the challenge of this video. I will be beating God of War 2018 with only Kratos' fists. Thanks to Ultimic EXE for this idea. I'm sorry it's been almost a year since you suggested it, but I hope this video lives up to your expectations. The rules for this challenge are relatively easy. I can only use unarmed combat as a means of dealing damage to enemies, and that's about it. I was going to use the rule of can only use my fists, but that would have ended immediately when we have to use an axe to chop down the tree, or at the first puzzle that involves throwing the axe to break a barrier so we can jump over a little gap. With the rules laid out before us, it's time to talk about how the run went. I already talked about using the axe to chop down the tree in the beginning of the game, but after that we are introduced to Kratos and his child. A short boat trip and we see specifically why a tree was cut down. Kratos' wife passed away and they need to get firewood to ashen her corpse to be able to spread those ashes where she desired, which is a very tall mountain. Boy, which is Kratos' child, was born with little bits of baby rage and used some of it to grab the burning knife that was on his mother's body. Kratos, doing his best to help stop the burning, smothers his hand in snow. In order to prepare Boy for his upcoming journey, Kratos takes him hunting. He doesn't have much experience, but he does his best. In the most dad moments in video games, Kratos hits his son with a fantastic dad joke.
What are we hunting?
You are hunting deer.
Which way?
In the direction of deer.
During the hunt, Boy becomes impatient and spooks the animal. Thankfully, it never seems to move too far, so they get another attempt to take it down for their morning meal. In between the multiple attempts at shooting the deer, we are introduced with our first combat encounter. These enemies are relatively easy to beat as they are the basic enemies, and I'm on the normal or balanced difficulty for the run. However, this encounter already brings up a problem that will persist through the rest of the challenge. The amount of damage I do is pitiful in comparison to what it could be if you used the intended combat mechanic of swinging your big axe around. You would think for a man with arms the size of tree trunks, Kratos would be able to punch the heads off of these weird demon things with relative ease. However, combat gets a little easier down the road with a gameplay mechanic that is introduced then and not any earlier, unfortunately. I will talk more about that mechanic when it gets introduced, but for right now, combat is a slog and takes forever. There is one thing I want to say, and you might have seen it in the gameplay playing in the background already, but that's the use of the shield. Technically, unarmed combat is classified as shield combat, so I can't help it when it comes to basic combat strings unless I just want to never have a combo to deal damage. Secondly, the parry mechanic. As it isn't dealing damage and it nullifies all incoming physical attacks, I'll be using it whenever I'm able to pull it off, and I'm no expert mind you, but being able to deflect an attack or two with my wrist-mounted dinner plate feels relatively good. We finally track down the deer, watching it eat its final meal and then take the killing shot. Unfortunately, we miss the painless spot and need to go in and end its suffering. With Kratos' unfortunate past when he was killing for selfish reasons, it's nice to see him try and relay the importance to his son about keeping things painless and killing only when you have to, rather than pulling the head off of the sun god, you know. This is a very tender moment that is immediately ruined by the first boss fight of the game. We are introduced to Boy's archery, which is used to help in certain fights, and I accidentally hit this button a couple of times as my muscle memory is still telling me square is the attack button and not the R1 button. However, I don't do it intentionally and it really doesn't do a lot of damage anyway, so I'm gonna just kind of wipe those under the rug and say that that's just damage that happens because Atreus, or Boy, also attacks just as fights go on, so we're just gonna chalk that up as it's small enough it doesn't really contribute to the challenge at all. Now onto the actual fight. The boss does about 3 different moves and 2 of them are easy enough to dodge. The move that hits me the most, about 90% of the time, is when he does a little stomp ground slam. It's fast, has very little windup, and it splashes all around him, so I usually take the damage. I don't have any ranged attacks, so this is just something I either have to learn to dodge or tank the hits. Spoiler alert, I basically just tank the hits as I don't think I dodged more than one or two. Contrary to the foot stomp, the other two attacks involve the giant pillar of stone that he's wielding. They have decent windups and they're relatively telegraphed, so all I need to do is learn which way to roll and stay within close range. There's another baby rage moment after the giant is slain with Boy, and then we head back home to rest after our hunt. On the way we learn about stunning enemies. Long story short, there's another bar under the health bar of enemies, which is the stun meter. The benefit with using my fist to attack is that it might be less damage overall, but it raises the stun gauge faster than me just using the axe. So now, as long as I can consistently hit enemies without letting the gauge drop too low, I can deal a decent chunk of damage when the gauge fills. We finally get home and then there's a knock on the door. We tell Boy to hide in the cellar with the potatoes and we answer the door. This stranger somehow knows who Kratos is and doesn't really care. He still demands we get into a fight with him. He's also able to take a couple of our punches and hit us back with about the same amount of force, so Kratos is definitely intrigued as to who this person is. There are parts of this fight that I struggle with. Some of his moves are relatively easy to see as they wind up, so I can dodge most of them. There are a few quick succession hits that do catch me off guard, but overall I didn't struggle too much with this fight until it's towards the end, where it was neck and neck, where I was really low, they were really low. However, this boss brings up the possibly last mechanic we are going to be interested in with this challenge. That's called our Spartan Rage. When fighting, we build up our rage meter, and once it's maxed out, we can press in the left and right stick and enter a hyper-aggressive playstyle, with increased speed, power, and the ability to heal ourselves whenever we punch something. The best part of this ability is that it uses our fists, so it's 100% within the challenge to use this mode whenever it comes up. Now that we've beaten the stranger, people know where we are and we are no longer safe in our home, so we need to take Boy and build a new life somewhere else. We are out looking for peace, but we are only going to find strife as our adventure is laid with fighting and death. As a lot of this game's story comes from cutscenes, and I don't want to spoil this game in the off chance that you haven't had the time to play it yet, I'll hit the important bits that I go over, but I do recommend either playing the game or watching somebody play through it because it does have a beautiful story with themes of dealing with your loss, not letting the past hold you back, and becoming much more than what you think you are. And my little video is just an Unga Bunga punch hard, so that kind of gives you about 2 different tones that you might want to experience. Speaking of punching things, one of the things I hate is when enemies figure out I don't know how to Hadouken Fire Blast them when they stand on a ledge shooting me from afar. I tried parrying the Spell Blast and hoping that it would just bounce back and hit them, and even went into Spartan Rage to see if I could lunge at them. Those were both done to no avail. In this very specific instance, I will make an exception to that rule where I don't only use my fists. However, in order to still keep a part of this challenge alive, I will only be able to use Boy's arrows to hit them. His arrows are on a cooldown and don't deal nearly as much damage as throwing the axe would do, so I will allow the ability to have arrows shot at enemies that I cannot reach, and only arrows, not throwing the axe at all. So we are now up to 2 rules. If you are going to be very nitpicky, you can say that the challenge ends here, because I can't hit the enemies that are on the ledge with only my fists. However, the challenge ends in a much dumber way not too long from now. Trust me. Speaking of exceptions to the rules, are you ready for another one? So here's technically rule number 3. There are witches that spawn. They are fast, have ranged attacks, have a poison spray, and the worst of all that is they are immune to fists. This could have also been the end of the run. However, I found out that Spartan Rage can hit them. That's a one-time limit though, as I can't do that reliably. Thankfully, Boy can stun them with his arrows, and I am able to punch them to death. Does this invalidate the run? Technically, yes, but I'm going to put this down under the same instance as the guys on the hill. As long as I can do a majority of the damage with my fists, it is okay to use the stun arrow on them. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to continue this run within the defined rule set, as technically I can do damage with my fists, I'm just smudging the finer details of the fight to accommodate this instance. Before the witch, I did fight some beefy boys, but they aren't too much to talk about. They hit hard, take more stun damage from behind when you hit them, and when you use a stun attack, you can drive them around like a bull, smashing into other enemies for a short time before throwing them away and dealing more damage on impact. They are able to stun you if you try guarding or parrying too much of their attacks, but just do the good old dodge roll and you should be good to go. Unfortunately, this brings me to the final area of the challenge. I thought I was going to get more than an hour and a half or so into the run, but I cannot. We are captured by some marauders and get rid of them pretty easily. Then some more demons show up and we need to take care of them. So a normal fight, right? Not really. There's another ranged enemy on the ledge that we can't punch. Well, I mean, we figured out a way around that, right? We just have Boy shoot him with the arrow. Except that he can't because he's cowering in a corner. There's also no way for me to get up on the ledge without possible glitches, and I don't know how to do any of those or if that would even help in this situation. Besides, I do these challenges as a quote normal person, meaning I try to do it in a way that anybody could try it if they wanted to. So no speedrun strategies, no glitches, and overall just bumbling my way to victory. Yes, I've played the game before, so I know some things that a new person wouldn't about some games, but if you're attempting a certain challenge in a video game, chances are you've played it at least once before, and are doing this challenge to get some longevity out of your game. Sorry about the random word vomit there, I just wanted to try and explain why I do things the way that I do them, and I don't go out of my way to make so many exceptions like I did earlier, but those were very niche cases because the idea and the ideals of the challenge were still intact as they were happening. I'm going to try and answer at least one possible question in the comments, that question being, why didn't you just use the axe in this one instance and continue the challenge? Well, I already had to make exceptions with earlier parts of the game, and the exception involved the weak and limited capability of Atreus, using his timed shots for enemies on a ledge and being able to stun witches so I could punch them. I couldn't use him at all for this fight, and there may be future situations where I can't use him and that he would be necessary to get around some enemies. I know there is at least one more section where he is unavailable and I don't know the enemies in that section, but I'm guessing there is at least one witch that would make it impossible to continue. This is a very long-winded answer, but the short answer is the game would lock me out of completion in the future at some point, and this challenge was to see how far you could go without using the axe. And this is the limit, about an hour and a half into the game, give or take your speed. Thank you again, Ultimate EXE, for this idea, and if anybody else has any ideas you want me to attempt for games that I've played, this game, Fallout, or games that I may not have played but I might get to in the future, please let me know either in the comments or the link in the description down below. I appreciate you all, whether you made it to the end of this video or not. Without you, I'm just some guy sitting in a room talking about playing video games incorrectly. Thank you for your support, and I hope you have a great day. I've been River. Peace out.